So, World War I started when this happened.
On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated along with his wife by a Bosnian Serb nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. On July 28th, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. By August, Germany, an ally of Austria-Hungary, had declared war on Russia, since they were readying troops and were an ally of Serbia.
A few days later, Germany invaded Luxembourg and declared war on France and Belgium, who were allies of Russia. Then France and Britain declared war on Germany and Austria-Hungary, and World War I began. At the beginning of the war, things were pretty back and forth between the Central Powers and the Allied Powers. The Central Powers were Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman side. The Allied Powers were Britain, France, Russia, and a few others.
In one conflict, Germany defeated Russia and bombed France, but were stopped from invading at the Marne River east of Paris. Something critical to understand is that back then, battles took a long time because of the main style used at that time: trench warfare.
Trench warfare involved, you guessed it, trenches. Trenches dug in the ground would be filled with soldiers and would stretch for miles across the land. Soldiers would fire at each other across a battlefield from them. There were typically 3 or more, usually many more, trenches dug parallel to each other on each side of the battlefield. The trenches closest to the front would usually have barbed wire, spiky, followed by a layer of machine guns.
Conditions in the trenches were very poor, with wet mud everywhere and terrible hygiene. Cartridges, uniforms, bandages, and even bone fragments could be found in the trenches. Many people got terrible infections from these conditions, and morale was very low for both sides. In trench warfare, there was an essential no man's land between the trenches. Since both sides were firing at each other across a good distance, couldn't really go to the other side without getting shot.
Overall, trench warfare really sucked. It was used in battles such as the battles of the Marne, the battles of Ypres, the Battle of Cambrai, and the Battle of the Somme. However, once tank usage by the Allies became more common around 1917, 1918-ish, trench warfare kind of started to go away. I mean, trench warfare is all about using heavy gunfire to fend off opposing soldiers across a huge battlefield. I don't really think that's going to be able to do anything to what it is. One last notable thing for 1914 was the Christmas truce on December 25th, when both sides camped in trenches, just decided to take a break, relax, have a celebration. Carols echoed across the no man's land. Yes, very sweet, but now it's back to business in 1915.
"1915 started out violently, with Germany saying in February that with their submarines, they would destroy any ship in British waters they could find. Yikes.
In April, the Second Battle of Ypres happened. In this infamous battle, Germany used chlorine gas against the Allies. This yellowish gas irritated the eyes, nose, lungs, and throat. It can kill you by asphyxiation if there was enough of it. Nasty business. On May 7th, Germany followed through with their promise. It torpedoed and destroyed the passenger ship Lusitania in British waters, killing over 1,000 people. Later in October, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Bulgaria invaded and captured Serbia. Oh yeah, by the way, Serbia is like right here. Remember, throughout this, there were still some battles going on. There just weren't really a lot. There only being about 13-ish in 1914 and about 5 in 1915. But yeah, that's about it for 1915, so on to 1916. In February, the Battle of Verdun began. This battle took place in France and lasted 10 months with hundreds of thousands of casualties. In May, Germany had to take a step back with using their submarine warfare. This is because Woodrow Wilson, who was the US president at that time, had threatened to cut off relations between the US and Germany because of everything that they were doing with their submarines. So Germany just said, fine, and called off their submarines. For now. At this point, Germany also feared the US joining the Allies against them, so they really didn't want to provoke them anymore.
On June 24th, the Battle of the Somme began. This terrible battle would last until November, and over 300,000 people were killed in it. In September, the British attempted to use tanks to turn the tide of the battle, but were mostly unsuccessful due to inexperience with them.
The bloody battle ended with British troops gaining a measly 6 miles. 1916 was another fairly uneventful year, only being about 5 battles, same as 1915, but things were about to kick up in 1917. At this time, the US was still neutral in the war. They had declared neutrality all the way back in August of 1914, and they were trying their best to stick to it.
However, tensions were rising at this time, since Britain had intercepted and shown to the US a telegram from Germany to Mexico saying they'd return Arizona, Texas, and New Mexico to them if they would join Germany. Of course, only if the Central Powers won.
That's a lot of information, and it was deeply disturbing to America. President Wilson began considering war.
In April, Wilson proposed war to Congress, and after they approved, the US had joined against Germany.
Although it was still decades off, the Cold War was beginning to fall into place. A major catalyst was when Germany snuck Russian revolutionary Vladimir Lenin back into Russia to disrupt their government. He had been exiled from there, basically for advocating revolution too loudly. What a handsome man. Anyway, their plan to disrupt the government worked, considering that by November, Lenin had actually overthrown the current government. And in July of 1918, his followers, the Bolsheviks, actually shot the Tsar and his family to death. The Tsar had actually already been kicked out of position by the people a good while earlier. Like, whatever. Back in 1917, first American troops began fighting in June, and the first drafting began in July.
On November 20th, the British were able to surprise and push back the Germans with tanks at the Battle of Cambrai.
I guess this time they managed not to screw it up. Now it's time to enter 1918, where it all comes to an end. In March of 1918, Germany's previous plans came through.
Because of the political and social instability of Russia caused by Lenin, Russia was forced to surrender and signed a treaty with Germany.
Little fun fact, the US actually started daylight savings time back in 1918. Why? I don't know, something about like saving energy or making better use of daylight. I'm gonna be real, that's kind of in one ear out the other with me. I've never really understood it. I don't know why we still do daylight savings time. I don't like how the sun sets at 5 o'clock or sooner. Moving on. From June to September, the US led a huge push in the war, winning battles, capturing key strong points, setting sea mines to stop German ships. This is of course a large simplification, but I don't have time for this. On October 17th, Hungary actually broke apart from Austria. Things were falling apart, and the Central Powers had no choice but to surrender.
On November 9th and 10th, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany and Emperor Karl of Austria abdicated, and on November 11th, Germany signed an armistice to end the war.
World War I was a terrible, bloody war. Over 20 million people were killed in it, and another 20 million being wounded. At that point, it was considered the worst war of all time. Oh, that's fine. That won't be for another 21 years.